Hello there everybody, Sam'sTrains here. Welcome back to the railway and welcome to the final video in my problem class series. I've built and painted the final version of the model and I'm about to reveal it to you now. The building and painting process did take a few solid days of work and it was quite stressful as usual. I had the normal faffing around with the transfers which didn't go that well and I had to try and redo them and such, blah blah blah, but the final product has been produced and here it is. And I have to say I am in love with this thing. I am so pleased with it. I doubt that it will be possible for me to ever produce a perfect model, but I do think that this is perhaps the closest I've ever come, and I think now, thanks to the resin printing, I am the closest I've ever been to a professional standard, even though I'm not there quite yet. So in today's video I'm going to show you all of the details and the features of this model now that it's been finished. I'm going to talk about the mechanism, I'm going to show you this thing running, we'll test the pulling power, we'll do all of that, but first of all I'm going to show you a little breakdown of what this model actually cost me to produce. So the first thing is the resin. I used 62.8, very precise, grams of resin, which comes to about £1.70. The next one was tin bismuth. I actually die cast a weight to put inside the loco. That was a whole story, but yeah, I made a resin cast and cast this tin bismuth in there so that I've got a weight that fits perfectly inside the locomotive. That cost me £1.23 in metal, so not an awful lot. FDM plastic, now I only used 2 grams of that for the tender base keeper plate and some of the handrails and such. That comes out at less than half a pence, so I think we'll wipe that off the total. The driving wheel tyres cost me £2 on eBay. The small wheels for the tender and the non-driven loco wheels, they were actually the biggest expense at £15 because those wheels are not currently in production. I had to get those second hand on eBay. Well, they were new old stock actually, but they were quite expensive. So yeah, £15. 1mm rods for the cylinders and such, and also the shafts for the gears. They cost 80p because I used 2 of those. The motor cost £5.80. That's a cordless motor from eBay, pretty decent, not too expensive for that either. The worm drive, you buy those in packs of 10, so they work out at 76p each. That's not too bad. In terms of paint, it's a little bit harder to say. I actually used all of the paint that I already have in stock. I had every colour except for the vermilion, which went into the cab and did the buffer beams as well. So I had to buy that. So I only ended up buying 1 bottle of paint, which cost me £2.95. And the total amount of paint used was less than 1 whole bottle. So I'm happy to use that figure. And also I used some wires for the pickups and also the loco to tender connection. Well, it's a couple of pounds for 10 meters of that stuff, and I used about 30 centimeters of it. So I'm not exactly sure how much the wire in this thing cost, but it's going to be pence if anything. So that gives me a total of £30.24 at consumer prices. Do bear in mind, if this thing was made at a factory, they'd be paying trade prices for all of this stuff, and so it would be much, much cheaper than that. Obviously, that price does not factor in the man hours that I put into this model, which is true. I kind of look at this as a hobby though, and a lot of people pay to partake in their hobby. I actually was doing this for days for free, which is awesome. However, if you wanted paying for all of the hours that I put into this model, obviously that would add a lot to the cost looking at this thing. The project has taken me just less than 3 months to complete, which sounds like a lot, but the vast majority of that time was the designing and the prototyping and the testing and such. The actual final build and assembly took me less than a week. So if you want the files off me, I will sell them to you for a low price, sort of 20 quid, something like that. And for personal use, you can create your own if you want to. And you're looking at about a week if you put a lot of time into it. I would probably recommend taking a bit longer and going slowly, but you know, that's entirely up to you. How does the price of this resin model compare with the price of the FDM models that I produced before? Well, it's turned out to be slightly more expensive. I mean, it's £4 more than 552, which was my last model, and only £2 more than copper knob. And actually the difference in cost here was not down to the resin. So there you go, not an awful lot of difference for a single model there. Right, let's move on then, and let me talk to you about the history and the background of the problem class in real life. The first of the problem class was built in 1859 to the design of John Ramsbottom for express passenger work on the LNWR. The first example of the class was problem number 184, though 60 were built in total. The name problem has a small handful of potential origins. The first was that the injector caused a lot of problems. It didn't work properly on the loco initially, so maybe they called it problem because of that. Another theory is less interesting, and it says that the name problem comes from the mathematical sense, a maths problem, if you will. I hope it's the former, personally. In the early days, the class was quite primitive looking. They had small boilers, open cabs with no shielding from the weather, and very old-fashioned looking smoke boxes. As the years went on, they were rebuilt and modified with larger boilers, improved cabs, and more conventional smoke box doors. This allowed them to fit in well with the newer locomotives of the early 1900s, and they were now even capable of speeds of up to 80 miles per hour. By the 20th century though, their performance began to fall short of newer and better designs, and they were relegated to double heading or even branch line work. Eventually the problems had to be withdrawn because they were just too small and weak to be of much use, and therefore between 1898 and 1907 every single one was cut up and scrapped. Next, in order for this video to qualify as one of my unboxing and review videos, I need to unbox the engine. So it's currently in a box. It is now out of the box, hence unboxing. Right, I'm going to weigh the model for you, let you know how much weight there is in this loco, and I'll warn you, it's not ever so impressive because it is of course 3D printed. So it comes in at 115 grams. So yeah, not a weighty loco. Obviously it's not die cast, it's not largely made of metal like some professional models would be, but you know, I don't think that's too bad. It is certainly enough for this thing to haul a number of pre-grouping coaches or something. So I think given the loco's size, I can just about live with that. So there she is, up close and personal for you, my brand new problem class, which was 3D printed. And I think viewing it up close like this is probably the cruelest way to look at this loco. From a distance, it almost looks like it could be a professional loco. Up close though, it's pretty clear that this was 3D printed and then hand finished and hand decorated. Having said that, I still think it looks okay to say that this was made at home. So let me show you some of the details and features. We'll talk about the decoration. The finish is quite flat on this, and that's because I tried a different varnish. I went with a satin varnish, a Vallejo one, and I don't know if their definition of satin is different from mine, but this is matte, you know, there's not even a hint of gloss in this. So it is what it is. I actually don't mind it too much, but I think I'll use a different varnish next time. That matte finish though did give me trouble with these transfers, and as you can see there are a few bubbles underneath them. I'm a bit confused as to how that happened because I took ages pushing the bubbles out and still as it dried more bubbles formed. It's quite interesting the way these transfers were made. All of the black printing you can see here came out of my laser printer, but the yellow of the numbers there was sprayed through a stencil that I resin printed. So yeah, that was quite a complex process. The banding on the boiler was done via masking and then airbrushing, so that is real paint on those, and they look so much better than transfer, so I'm really pleased with that. You've got the green painted cylinders and then the black painted smoke box, which I'm really pleased with. Look at all the detail in the smoke box there. That was never possible with my FDM 3D printing. I think my favourite part of the decoration is the problem nameplate, which was also a 3D printed piece. And then a little secret for you, the black lettering and the bordering on this nameplate was done with a Sharpie. If anybody knows of a better way to paint embossed lettering like that, please do let me know, but the Sharpie for black worked absolutely perfectly as far as I'm concerned. The pipework on the loco has been picked out by hand, as has the pipework on the chassis, where there's even more detail on the firebox, as you can see. And the buffer beams have also been painted as well, and you've got these separately fitted buffers which have the housings painted green and then the separate buffers themselves painted into the sort of steel colour, and again I'm really pleased with that. Let's take a look at some of the details then. Let me show you the wheels. Yeah, best wheels I've ever produced because they are resin printed, which is great. Same with the main driving wheels here, with the connecting rod and the crank pin fitted to it. Here's a look at the crosshead that does of course work. So we've got a working cylinder there. The rods that you can see are just steel rods. It's only the crosshead there, and then the connecting rod, which is 3D printed, and obviously those are not real metal, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the finish there, but it's actually not too bad. You've also got cylinder drain cocks pre-fitted under here, and also guard irons which are separately fitted as well. The buffer beams have this chain fitted to them. That is also a 3D printed part, and so are the lamp brackets on top of the buffer beam there. The smoke box also has a separately fitted handrail on the top of it. The rest of the detail there is actually 3D printed in place. You've got a clack valve on the side of the boiler there, which is a separate part. So is the reverser rod, and also the sanding levers here are separate pieces, as are the silver painted handrails which go across the loco. The dome is a separately fitted part. Not 100% happy with the fit of this. I think I'd criticise that if I saw it on a professional model, so I'll do the same here. I need to look at that, see if I can improve the fit for future models. We've also got the safety valves, which is one of my favourite components on the loco. Yeah, I hand painted these. Obviously I sprayed them into the brassy colour, and then the steel section and the red section was hand painted. You've also got these tiny little wheels, which are impossibly small, aren't they? And they are indeed separately fitted. Let's take a look inside the cab, where we've got separately fitted window frames. No glazing inside those, unfortunately, but they are just so tiny. And you can probably tell that the cab controls on the top wall of the cab are hand painted, and yeah, they are a tiny little bit messy. The rest of the cab detailing though came out really nicely. We've got the separately fitted regulator and reverser wheel, and also these wheels on fully detailed columns as well, which I love. In terms of the tender, we've got a detailed underframe which is complete with brake rigging, and we've got the same wheels as on the loco, well, the non-drivers at least. Detailed chassis with these axle boxes and springs and such, all 3D printed of course, and then you've got the steps which are picked out in the black as well. The body has lining on it, which is achieved via transfers, and again, not 100% happy with these, but I think they're more or less okay. We've got separately fitted 3D printed handrails on the sides of the tender. We've also got a resin printed wheel, which has been painted into a steel colour, and then the separately fitted coal load, which I think doesn't look too bad. Maybe it looks a bit porous perhaps, but yeah, it's not that bad. We've got the little handles, which are separately painted, and also the water filler, which I'm delighted with. I love the finish of that area. Then around the back there are separately fitted lamp brackets, which are also 3D printed. Another buffer beam, which is similar to the one on the loco really. And then we've got a NEM coupling on the back, which obviously allows this to couple up to some coaches. So I think that's pretty much the entire guided tour. The loco is 99% entirely 3D printed. The only things you can see that are not 3D printed here are the metal tyres on the wheels. Everything else was homemade right here. Obviously on the inside there's a motor as well, but that's pretty much it. So I'm really pleased with the way this turned out. I managed to assemble it to a high standard, I think. I've managed to do it without getting any visible glue. Hopefully you didn't spot any. Let me know if you did. But generally, yeah, I think it's a good, clean, tidy assembly. If we saw professional models assembled with such little glue on display, I think the hobby would be a lot better placed. But anyway, I'm not here to blow my own trumpet. Let's get this down onto the track. I'll talk to you about the mechanism and I'll show you the performance. So there she is, Problem, down onto the track, and I love the way this thing looks on the track. From a distance like this, all of the details pop, and the slight lack of finesse in areas becomes a lot harder to spot. Anyway, I'm going to show you performance in just a second, but first let me talk you through the mechanism just briefly. The tender axles sit on these resin bearings, which actually works pretty good. They've got a small surface area, so there's low friction there. And then there is a base keeper that goes on top of this, which has been removed now, but this has pickups on it so that all of the tender wheels pick up power. There's then this snap together drawbar between the loco and the tender, which is not as good as some drawbars on professional models, but it is at least easy to use. And then the loco is very complicated this time. It is the most complex mechanism I've ever designed. It's got 3 separate base keeper plates, one for each axle. I'll remove the center one to show you what's underneath. And there are slots here for the driving wheel bearings, Both sets of driving wheels do have proper bearings on them, which is obviously good quality. And then there are wiper pickups on the driving wheels as well. So we've actually got 5 pickups per rail, which is pretty good. That's all you could ask for on a loco of this size, really. Here's a look at what the chassis looks like without the body fitted. You can see the setup here. The motor goes at the front end, and this is the larger kind of coreless motor, the kind that Bachmann have used in some of their steam locos. Sadly, no room for a flywheel this time. Again, I do keep picking these small locos that make it impossible to fit in a flywheel, but it's only lightweight anyway, and there is minimum drag thanks to the lightweight pickups and the bearings and such, so it still produces a relatively smooth ride even without the flywheel. And then the wheels have been gauged at 14.3mm back to back. That's about the standard for most locos, just below the official standard there. And the pulling power, or the traction, comes in at 0.07 newtons, which is obviously not a great deal because the loco's only light. The whole thing weighs just 115 grams. That should allow it to couple up to around 8 coaches and be able to haul them on straight and level track. For this first test, I've just got a couple of 4-wheel coaches ready to go. Only 2 because I've only got 2 of the LNWR ones, but to really let this loco stretch its legs, I will add a few more later on and see how she gets on. But for now, performance, let me show you the way this loco runs. Let's just go up and down a little bit to start with. And you can tell straight away really that there is quite some smooth performance here, which is good to see. I will hold my hand up and say this is a fast loco, and the reason is partly my fault, partly the fact that we've got such a large driving wheel here. So even if this driving wheel was to turn quite slowly, the loco would still go pretty fast due to its size. And because there's not that much room inside here, I wasn't able to gear it down as much as I would have liked. So as a result, it does run pretty fast. I'm going to go past at 50 for you now. You ready? There you go. Yeah, so it is very, very fast, but again, thanks to the lightweight pickups, the proper bearings on the axles, and the fact that those coreless motors are really good, it is still able to be smooth at the lower speeds, and it's not going to win any awards for its crawling, that's for sure, but it can do a fair job. So let me show you that. I'll just ease this up. It does kick in at quite low power. There we go, it started there. So, you know, I think that's more than adequate for a homemade loco that runs as fast as it does. I mean, blimey. Yeah, I think it's okay. And as you can see, it is smooth at most speeds like that. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy. Still not that smooth in reverse. I never did figure out why that was. I'm thinking I might have to put spacers between the chassis and the gears. I think that might be the reason. But, yeah, it's not as smooth in reverse. But fortunately, it's buttery smooth in forwards, which is good. Right, let me go and try and couple up to these coaches then and see what the coupling height's like. Here we go. There we go. Not a very gradual coupling there, but did it work? Yep, it did work. So coupling at the right height, a successful coupling. Right, let's set off then, and I'll show you how this loco handles the layout and the curves and the slight incline on Gordon's Hill. So let's do a gentle start with coaches. Here we go. Alright, so on the other lines I've decided to show you some of my other 3D printed locos. The one on the middle line here is actually the last one I built, which is the Great Eastern 552, and I'll be honest, I really thought this was great when I finished it. Now it looks awful compared with the problem class. Yeah, just FDM 3D printing, not up to the same standard. And of course, because I was FDM printing this, I didn't put the same level of detail into it. So yeah, not as good as problem, but still a fun project, I guess. There it goes with some freight. And then on the inside line, I have another engine of mine known as Old Copper Knob. And here she comes now. Actually, I still think this does look pretty good. To say that it was FDM 3D printed, what I would love to do is do an upgraded version of this. I would add more detail, print it in resin, and have a super detailed, super accurate copper knob. It's going to have to be added to the massive long list of projects I want to do, so it's not going to be any time soon. But there she is, Old Copper Knob. Alright, problem with coaches then. Now she's only running at 30% speed here, so because she's geared to run so fast, there's not a great deal of torque in the mechanism. So I notice a slowdown when she goes around those second radius curves. It's not chronic or anything, but the fact that she's only got 2 coaches and she's slowing down like that, yeah, it's not fantastic. And if I saw a pro model do that, I would certainly not be ignoring it. So I'm not going to ignore this. But as you can see, yeah, she's handling those 2 coaches absolutely fine, as well she should, because obviously they're quite free rolling and there's only 2 of them. But yeah, she looks gorgeous with coaches. I've got proper LNWR coaches thanks to the Hatton's Genesis range, so I can see this with some coaches that it was designed to run with. Yeah, really, really pleased with this. This is a loco I looked at in photos and thought, oh, I'd love one of those. And here we are a few months later and I've got one. It's amazing what this technology can do. But like I say, 2 coaches, not much of a challenge. So let's bung on 3 more. Let's make it up to a rake of 5. They won't be LNWR, unfortunately, but it ought to be a good test. So let's try that. Okay, 5 coaches then. I think this is a bit more like the sort of load these would have been hauling in the 1800s. And I'm not seeing that much more of a difference, really. I think it slowed down a bit more, maybe, on those second radius curves. It didn't struggle up the incline, which I'm very pleased with. So yeah, it can haul 5 pre-grouping coaches without any problems. Maybe it could do more, I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem to be struggling unduly here, but I don't want to push it. You know, it's a resin-printed mechanism. I'm just going to be happy with this and know that it can handle 5 coaches with relative ease. So there you go, decent performer, I would say. A little bit on the speedy side, but then they were pretty fast in real life. So I'm pretty pleased with that, I would say. Alright, I'm going to try and do some ratings then for my problem class, and I'll be honest, I do find this tricky. It is hard to be objective about something that you've loved and obsessed over for months and months. I'm going to try and be objective here and be critical where it's deserved, but if I'm too generous, please do pull me up on it. Detail wise, I've given it 4 star. I think thanks to the amount of detail resin printing is capable of, I've managed to produce the most detailed loco I've ever built before. So it's got a detailed cab, it's got full riveting, tons of separately fitted parts, also with loads of detail on them. The safety valves look awesome, so does the tender and all of its little details. However, it's not quite at that high 5-star level that professional models are at. It doesn't have sprung buffers, for instance, and it's light on special features such as lighting and that, and I guess also up close some of the details don't look as fine as professional models. So I've knocked off 1 star, maybe that is a little bit generous, maybe it should have been a 3, but I gave Firefight 2 a 3 and this is a lot better than that. Performance, I've given 3.5 star. I think there's good in the performance. It is really smooth and quiet. I'm quite surprised how smooth and quiet this is, being that it runs on resin gears, but it is. The crawl is also pretty darn good to say how fast it runs and to say that it's a single wheeler. So those are the pros. It's also very reliable thanks to all of the pickups. However, because of the size of those driving wheels and the lack of gearing in this thing, it does run quite fast, and that means that it does struggle a little bit with torque at times, and also for some reason it's not that great in reverse. If these issues had have been fixed, I think this could have been a 5-star performer, but it's not, so it's a 3.5. That's the best I can do. Pulling power, this is not a powerhouse as you'd fully expect of a 3D printed loco. It's not as bad as it might have been thanks to that die-cast weight I made for this, but it still only hauls at a tractive effort of 0.07 newtons, or about 8 coaches on straight and level track. By most standards, that is not a powerful loco. I guess I could have used traction tyres or something like that, but I just didn't want to, so it's using its own weight and it's not that powerful as a result, but I guess I'm happy with it. Mechanism, I've given 3-star. Again, there's good and bad in the mechanism. On the plus side, there are lots of pickups. You've got proper bearings on the driving wheels, decent motor, no traction tyres, that sort of thing. However, there's also no flywheel on this. I usually pull models up for that, so I will do. There's also no DCC socket on board. That could be remedied. I just didn't put one on because I didn't want one, but it doesn't have one, so I'm going to reflect that as well. It suits my purposes absolutely fine, but it's not quite up there with the professional models, so it loses a couple of stars for that. Similarly, the quality, I've given 3-star. I have built this really carefully, and I managed to get it together without any visible glue or anything like that. However, up close you can still see that this has a bit of a 3D printed finish. Some of the parts are a little bit wonky. The transfers didn't work out that well. I will have to look at transfers yet again next time. And it's not a die-cast model. It's made of resin, so not plastic. I guess it's better than plastic, but it's still the same sort of weight as it would be if it was plastic. So it does lose a couple of stars for that. I've just given it 3 star. Value for money though, this cost me 30 quid. That's it. Cost me 30 quid. I did have to spend a lot of time building it, which I haven't factored into that cost. But this is my hobby. The fact that I got to do this for free is a bonus in my opinion. And so for 30 quid plus 2 or 3 months of pure joy designing and testing and building this thing, yeah, it's a 5 star for me. That's about 8 times less than this would have cost if it was professionally made. And honestly, this has brought me a lot more pleasure than it would have done if I had just bought it off the shelf, even though it would almost certainly have been a better model if it was bought off the shelf. Overall though, that is 7.43 out of 10, or a grade of C. What do you think about that? Do you think that's on the money? Do you think I should have been more generous? Do you think I should have been less generous? I think it's a little generous myself, but I'll see what you say. Into the logbook we go then, and it is 22nd place, above the Bachmann GP7 and below the Helgen ES1. Now, I think the only reason it's ranked as highly as this is because of the value score, which was pretty high. I think if this had have cost 200 or 250 pounds, the value for money would have been far poorer here and it would have been much further down the ranking. But you know, this cost 30 quid, so that makes it much cheaper than some of this other stuff. Yeah, really pleased with it. So folks, there you have it. That is a full tour of my LNWR problem class. Just less than 3 months in the making, and I've really truly loved every moment of it. So please do let me know what you think. Do you think it is getting close to those professional standards that I'm looking for? And how do you think it could be moved closer to them? Yeah, please do let me know what you think. If you'd like to try these files for yourself, do contact me via email, and as long as it's for personal use, I'll let you have them for a song basically, and you can give them a try. It's not for the weak-hearted. This is quite a tricky kit to print and build, and you do need a few specialist parts such as the tyres for the wheels, the right motor, the right worm drive, which is available on AliExpress I believe if you want to look it up. It's a 0.5 module worm drive with a 1mm hole. They've not been available for a while, but they are back available now, which is great. But with that, I'm going to sit back and enjoy my new problem class. So glad that I finally got one of these. And it is definitely the best loco that I have ever built, which isn't saying an awful lot, but this is, I think, proper loco number 5 that I've done now. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. So bless you all for watching. Thank you for following me on this project. That will bring it to a close, I guess. So on to the next. I've got ideas for what I'm going to design and build next, and I'm hoping you're going to like it. So I'll see you very soon with those. Thank you for watching once again, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, cheers everybody. You take care.